This is one of those where Amy should have played by two actresses.
Catfight.
Yes, compared to the 1970s, she wasn't as annoying, but still wasn't the weirdest. She didn't have that weird, high-pitched, whiny voice, but she is still very clearly a woman in her 20s.
It wasn't that long ago that I watched the first part of this 1978 series. I'm going to watch the second part soon. I remember the burning scene was quite intense. Amy is like sneaking around, looking over her shoulder if Jo is near. I got this feeling that they made Amy to be 16 when that happens in this series, when in the book she's 12. It feels like it is a high school girl trying to frame another girl. It feels very malicious. Yeah, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah, I recently watched it. Really felt like, ooh, let's get the dirt on the girl type of thing. I really liked the actress that played Jo. I thought she did a pretty good job, and I didn't mind the narration bit. I think that was actually kind of helpful in some ways. It moved the story along. I don't know how you thought about that. I didn't mind it. I know some people don't like it when stuff like that happens. They're like, totally gets me out of the mood of the moment or whatever, but I think they managed to make it work.
I don't think there was a lot of it. In the beginning of each episode, Jo starts with the narration, but she doesn't do that throughout the whole episode. It is just in the beginning. That never bothered me. You know, it is really funny when I watch this. She's at Aunt March and she's reading Three Musketeers. I read that Rossano Brassi played Athos in the Italian version of Three Musketeers, sometimes in the early 40s. And Gabriel Byrne played Professor Bear in 1994 film. He played D'Artagnan in Man in the Iron Mask, which means that Jo marries a musketeer. I love that.
Somehow they are all connected to each other.
Now I need a Three Musketeers and a Little Woman mashup.
Beth could be Aramis. Maybe Jo would be Porthos. Meg could be Athos. Amy could be a good D'Artagnan. Porthos, I think, is a little bit more wild and mischievous.
Porthos was very adventurous.
So, if you ever wondered who would Little Women be as musketeers, we just did that. I was going to say earlier about the narration, I think they did pretty good job with it. I have never been able to see full version of this. I have only seen bits and pieces, but there is an adaptation of Jane Eyre from the 70s where the narration just never stops. It was to the point where, like, she is narrating what she is doing. Like, then I moved on to open the curtains. She is doing that all the time, and we don't need that kind of narration. Certain moments fine, but that was very weird. If I want to complain about narration, that version comes to mind. I would say that this version is pretty faithful. What would you say?
Yes, I think it is.
Obviously, there are moments they kind of mashed up. I was thinking in the beginning where Jo and Meg go to that party, it is a mashup between that and Meg's Vanity Fair moment. They put all of that together at once, but it worked all right, I think. It didn't feel as awkward I think it could have been. They managed, I think, to do a good job compared to this 1970 where it was like, how many episodes was that? 4?
I think it has like 8 episodes.
8, yeah. 1970 has a lot more episodes to expand it, where this one had 2. I think they managed to do a pretty good job of putting everything together in a way that you can sit there and go, oh, I remember this moment from the book. It gets a point from me on how they manage all of the girls' stories. 1970s in general movies and productions are not my most favorites. Without some exceptions, I feel like it feels very dirty and grunge, or they really take certain things and really mess around. I think they did pretty good job exploring all the girls' stories. I was afraid this was going to be like, here is Jo and her sisters. You know what I mean?
This version also has lots of scenes between John and Meg. And this version had the scene from the book where Meg doesn't really let John to participate in raising their children, and Mommy discusses about that with her. It does expand more to the lives of the other sisters too, beside Jo.
I can't honestly remember if this was 71 or 1978, but there is the sweet moment of Meg giving John his coat. I always just remember that moment because I just thought that was the sweetest, and actors were very good in those scenes. I have no idea who they really are. I haven't personally seen them in anything else, but they were pretty good.
I think it might also have the jam scene.
Yes, I am pretty sure too. It is not as long as I think the 1970 is, but again, that one had weirdly Jo and Laurie messing around the kitchen. That one showed the difficulties they had in the beginning. I want to say it was this one where there was a moment between John and Jo where they had a sort of understanding, a small reconciliation scene between them. Jo being like, "You'd better take care of her. If you don't, I will kick your butt."
I wanted to ask you, do you remember any adaptations where Jo would like to pair Meg with Laurie, like she does in the book? I don't think there are any.
Only one I can think of is possible throwaway line in 2017 Masterpiece version.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't think so.
I think it is one of those things that people are confused about. They are like, Jo hates marriage because she doesn't want John to marry Meg. But in the book, Jo wants Meg to marry Laurie. She is not against marriage. She sees John as a stranger. Laurie is someone she knows. There's a big difference between that. But the adaptations leave that part out.
Now that you say that, I don't recall that in the adaptations.
In the 1949 film, we see Jo raising her fist to the broomstick. She's so angry that Meg is in love, but she wants Meg to marry Laurie in the books. So it is quite silly. And then later on, she wants Laurie to marry Beth.
I don't remember there being a moment, obviously, in the book when Beth is crying. Jo has this moment, and it is definitely in the 2017 adaptation, but there are not many adaptations that have Jo mistaking Beth's melancholy for unrequited love for Laurie. There is not many. There is a moment where Jo catches Beth crying here, because I remember Jo is like, "Is there something wrong with the twins?" Beth is like, "No," and Jo asks, "Is there something wrong with you?" Maybe there is a moment there. I can't remember from the top of my head. As far as I know, the 2017 Masterpiece Theater is the only one that addressed Jo's mistaken belief that Beth has a crush on Laurie.
That is good that there's at least one in our list which includes that. I will watch the second part of this 1978 version soon and see if there is anything related to this topic.
What did you think of the actor that plays Laurie? I would like to know what you think.
I really like him. He's one of my favorite Lauries of all times. I think it is because he is both emotional and he also has a high temper. Laurie is controlled by his emotions, but he's not all moody, which is how I feel like the 2017 and the 2019 versions tend to portray him. Laurie is mostly controlled by two emotions, his anger and his happiness, and I feel like this version really captures that, and I love it.
I was kind of on unshaken ground. First, I was like, I really don't like him, but then I was like, no, the actor is actually really good. It took me a moment to remember that Laurie really is this way. In the novel, he is that emotional. In the other versions, we have seen more subdued Lauries. And this is, like you said, pretty close to the book, and I really liked his scenes with Amy. This one did pretty good job of their moments together.
Thank you so much for sharing my love for Little Woman. All the transcriptions of the Little Woman podcast are now available as paperbacks, ebooks, and as audiobooks on Amazon, Kindle, Nook, and bookstores. You can find all the links from the description. And now, back to the show. I think this version manages to foreshadow Laurie's and Amy's relationship already from the beginning because they have many scenes together. I feel like in many adaptations, Laurie and Amy are portrayed arguing when they are adults, but not in this version. Here we see him being very supportive of her art and what she wants to become. It is really nice. When Laurie is being moody in France, he meets Amy again. There's a moment when he's drunk, and you see how he sobers up when Amy speaks to him. It is one of my favorite moments in this adaptation. You do get this feeling that he realizes He's falling for Amy, and you can visually see that. I really like it.
I just remembered something from the 1970 because I compared the two. In 1970, when Amy goes after Jo and Laurie at the pond, here in 1978-1, it is in the winter when she falls through the ice. 1970 is the weird one where it is summertime and she just sprains a leg and she can't swim. That was really weird. I just remembered that now. That was a weird choice. Why would you do that?
It does not look like a pond. It's like a pool filled with plastic where she falls.
I was thinking that scene. After the book burning, we are getting into reconciliation between Jo and Amy. This is where we really start having that moment. That was a moment that made me go, that was weird. Here they had that moment too, and Laurie was pretty good in that scene, helping Jo and being kind with Amy. That was where I was like, that actually was kind of nice. When they pulled Amy out, she was close to Laurie. If I remember that correctly, and I thought that was quite nice foreshadowing for their relationship.
The 1978 Laurie is played by Richard Gilliland, and he's this blonde man with blue eyes. The book Laurie has brown skin, curly black hair, dark Italian. This Laurie does not look like Italian, but I think he captures the essence of the character.
He is very boyish, very free, and when I think about the appearance of someone like Friedrich in this version, Laurie here is blonde and tall, and you go like, why wouldn't Jo fall for him compared to William Shatner, who is more sturdy, more broad, brown-haired, more reserved? I think it is physically a good way to show what is inwardly the difference between the two of them. As much as Laurie is not quite true to the book, it was a good visual key to show the difference. And why does Jo leans towards Friedrich?
This version does really good job with Laurie and his grandfather's relationship. There are these scenes between them where we see how his grandfather wants to bond with him, but he doesn't know how to do that. It's almost like the two of them have these self-protecting walls surrounding them. I think it does a good job showing that Jo and Laurie don't work as a romantic couple, because we see them arguing quite a lot in this version. In the other 70s version, they actually argue even more.
I just remembered a really nice moment. This is something I feel like too many adaptations have. As much as we talk about the relationship between Beth and Mr. Lawrence, there is a good relationship between Jo and Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
I remember there is a moment where they are in town and Mr. Lawrence and Laurie get into a fight. They are in billiard room, Laurie runs off, and Jo is there comforting him. Later on, Mr. Lawrence says, Jo, what is wrong? She is like, we just had a fight. Laurie proposed. He is like, are you sure you can't? She is like, no, there are lots of great moments that happen between Jo and Mr. Lawrence that I don't feel like many adaptations show. It is a shame. Beth is the one who kind of leads him to the March family, and here it truly feels like he is part of the family, and when Beth dies, obviously he is not alone. He has Amy and Jo and Meg there to be supportive and be there for him. There is a lot of really nice moments between those two that I feel like are underrated.
During that moment in the billiard hall, when Laurie and his grandfather begin to argue, Laurie runs off, and then Jo speaks to Mr. Lawrence. She says, you need to be more gentle with him.
The two of them are probably closest to Laurie, and it is a great way of showing understanding. They both know the different aspects of Laurie, and they work together to help Laurie to be the best version of himself. Like you said, Jo tells him you have to be more gentle with him. They work together trying to handle Laurie's emotions. There is a scene that is underrated.
It goes along with the narration in the book that Jo is more of a little mother to Laurie, rather than a love interest. Jo is always like, my little Laurie, my boy, the first boy I ever raised. Jo is the mother archetype, and Mr. Lawrence tries to be the father archetype, which he could not be with his own son.
I think Marmee was really well done here. I did like the moment when Marmee talked to Jo about her temper. I like that we had a moment where we did see Marmee's temper, not only in a way that is actually correct versus the 1970 where she is mean to Amy, but she comes to the realization, oh boy. The moment we see that is when Amy comes home after her hand gets whacked, and Marmee has that moment when she is going to storm out and say something to the teacher. You see her to have that moment she realizes that she cannot let her temper to get the better of her. She goes back in and very calmly says, "We will take care of you and I will write a letter to your teacher." I feel like that was the better way of showing Marmee's tendencies for temper versus the 1970. I did like that, and I think in general she did a pretty good job. Being gentle but very not stern, strong hand. I don't know who the actress is, but I did like her. I am trying to remember scenes with Mr. March. He is not that present.
I don't remember Mr. March. There were some really good scenes with Aunt March.
I did like Aunt March in this. I think what probably helped too was just the casting of Greer Garson. Greer Garson has one of those wonderful voices. It is very distinct, and you know how sometimes you hear someone saying that you have a great voice for narration? She has a wonderful voice for that. She is very nice, prim, and proper type of lady. You need to be proper. You need to marry a man that is wealthy. You need to act like a Lady Jo. But then there is an amusing moment after Jo leaves. She opens the Three Musketeers and reads it.
I loved that. That was a funny moment. It shows that she has sense of humor.
Yeah, she is not quite as tough as she pretends to be because it is true to the book too. She says, if you will marry this Crooker Brooke, she says, I will disown you. But then she gives the couple a wedding gift. Yeah, I cannot stay mad at you forever. I think they did a pretty good job showing a balance of her character. Her meaner side, but also her gentle side.
It is interesting that Louisa May Alcott wrote Aunt March's husband to be very much like Friedrich. Nobody talks about him. He is not mentioned in the adaptations. He is written to be this man who loved children, was a great father, loved books and reading.
It is one of those little moments you kind of go like, it's not very big, but it's like a nice little Easter egg there. I do want to talk about Jo's and Friedrich's relationship in this version. This one is another one that I rank pretty high. If you are a Jo and Friedrich fan, you want to watch this because there is a lot of scenes of them in New York.
There are some of my favorite Jo and Friedrich moments. Definitely the one when she is going back to Concord. He runs after her carriage and gives her the Shakespeare book. And I'm like, my heart is melting. I can't take it.
I know. Oh my God. And I love the moment Jo is going to drop of his socks after mending them. She finds his book and she is reading it and he walks in and he stands on the doorway. I always say that in this version, that is the moment when he realizes he is in love with her because he looks at her being like, look how beautiful she is. Oh my God, I love her. I always read it that way. That is the moment when he really understood what his feelings were. That moment I liked, and I liked their first meeting. And this is a small little bonus point. This is the first version we see Emil and Franz in because we don't see them in 1970. They're mentioned, but we never see them. This is where we see them for the first time. He and Jo go out with the boys and the girls to the park. I like their first meeting because obviously very clear that they do like each other. When she leaves, she offers her hand and he kisses it. And I'm like, that is so cute. He is a gentleman, but not in a patronizing way. That is how Friedrich is. There is a lot of really great moments in this.
One of my other favorites is when Jo is back in Concord and then in New York, Friedrich is looking for a job so that he could move to Concord and provide a home for Jo. We see him going through these university teaching positions. To me, in the book, that was really one of the most romantic aspects about Friedrich's character. He is incredibly poor, but he is willing to work for Jo. He would give a coat from his bag for Jo.
I really like that scene. He says, this isn't going as I planned. In Under the Umbrella, he goes, I will take a wife. If you will have me, I am in love with you. It is so adorable. In the most affectionate way. They are both idiots in love. They presume one thing. They can't seem to make it quite so rom-com type of romantic scene, but it is still in an enduring way a romantic scene.
That is another plus. The dialogue in Under the Umbrella, it has similarities to the book.
This one has two moments of Friedrich following Jo's writing. When Mrs. Kirk shows up, look, another story by Jo. He takes it and he reads it. I really like that moment because it shows that he is falling into her writings and he is like, she is doing a really good job. This version does have the argument between the two of them. They make up, there is admitting on Jo's part that maybe it is not the greatest of her writings. They come into understanding when he is like, even though your writing is good, you cannot expect me to go back on everything I have just said, what I believe in. She is like, no, I don't expect you to. You should. That is why I like you. You are very certain and strong in what you feel. As much as I don't like them arguing, I can appreciate that they manage to bring it back to them having this understanding that this is who they are and appreciate that.
It is weird with the arguing. I don't know where people come up with that. In the book, even before Jo meets Friedrich, she calls her sensational stories as trash and rubbish, and she keeps on repeating that. Sensational stories are trash. I don't like writing them. I only write them for the money. She's not defending sensationalism itself. She doesn't like that type of literature and has very little respect for it.
I can only imagine either two things. One, whoever the scriptwriter was kind of misinterpreted that moment from the book, or they thought I can't have anything good and simple. So they needed to add little drama into the scene. And so they felt like, oh, let's have a moment where they argue about this, because they must have thought, oh, relationships cannot be real if there isn't at least one argument or something, which is weird. We may have grown up with that notion. For now, realizing you can have a relationship when you don't argue. Disagree, but no arguments where you get mad at each other, shouting and all that jazz. I think that was one of the things where I was like, I don't want to make it sound like it is a bad thing, but the 70s was really when the feminist movement began to gear, and that is great. But this is one of those scenes where I was worried about when I was watching this version. Are they go up with this gear and make it more than what it was? You know what I mean?
I think the earlier 70s version does that a lot more.
That was the thing I was worried about. I felt like they wanted to put the argument in and be like, watch Jo having backbone. You know what I am trying to say? Compared to some of the other versions where they really take that extreme feminism to the other end. This one still manages to be where it is supposed to be.
You know, in the book, it is really Laurie who does not want Jo to write. And sadly, a lot of modern feminists who don't read the book and only watch the adaptations are like, Friedrich didn't want Jo to write. Friedrich is based on Goethe, who Louisa May Alcott adored and who inspired her to become a writer in the first place. That narration doesn't make any sense. In the 1994 film, that is the only one where Laurie says, you don't need to write if you don't want to.
Right.
In the book, Jo says that Laurie, would not approve her writing. Laurie would not approve Jo writing. But that is not in the adaptations. Instead, they have this argument between Jo and Fritz, which is not in the book. So they changed the narrative, which is really weird. And as a canon fan, I say that is unforgivable.
It is blown by in certain adaptations. I think, like if I remember correctly, in 33 and 49, in the proposal scenes, Jo says you would hate my scribblings. In 94, Laurie is like, you don't have to write, and then she makes a face, and he says, unless you want to. He doesn't say it in a way like, oh, you don't have to write for money. It's like, you don't have to write ever, unless if you don't want to.
It feels like he doesn't take it that seriously that Jo wants to write. That is the feeling I get from the 1994 film, which is true to the book. Laurie did not take it that seriously.
In the 78 version, do they have a scene where they discuss her writing?
I don't think they had that discussion. The proposal scene, I don't think it was that angry. Jo does say that if she would meet the right person, it should be our earth-shaking love. And which is a really good scene in this series, because that is also in the book. And Laurie is hurt, but I didn't get the feeling that he was incredibly disappointed, or maybe it was just me.
It doesn't feel quite as emotionally charged as it could have been on Laurie's part.
That is interesting. Maybe he expected Jo to say no?
You can either see him disappointed but trying to not show it, or him having that moment of realization. Maybe I don't like Jo as much as I think I do.
I would like to go with that because I am an Amy and Laurie shipper.
Oh yeah, this one was better than I expected. It felt very true to the story. Actors were pretty good. It has its moments, but if you had to put it on the ranking, where would you put it?
It is 5 or 4 for me, I'd say.
At the moment, let's do 5 because I feel like we are going to switch some things soon.
I think so too. We should rank the best couples in the adaptations, like the best Jo and Friedrich chemistry or the best Amy and Laurie chemistry.
Yes, sometimes adaptation is not the greatest, but this one has the best version of this couple. You got to, really break it down.
We can do that someday. I did remember something about the 1978 series that I absolutely love. That is the moment when Jo and Beth are by the seaside. Jo is either writing a letter for Friedrich or she is reading a letter from him. Beth takes it. She's teasing her and calls him her professor. It is adorable. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I do remember they were corresponding. I do remember that he gets a letter from Jo and he is the one who says that your sister is dying. And when he writes back, Beth is like, oh, another letter from your professor. And Jo is like, he is not my professor. She is not angry or anything, but you kind of feel like she would wish he was. I do remember that. That was a really nice moment. It is not only a nice moment showing Jo and Friedrich's relationship and how much they interact, but it is a nice moment between Jo and Beth, I got to say.
I really like it, and it is pretty rare to see Jo and Friedrich writing these letters in the adaptations because it is one of my favorite parts in the books. They become pen pals after they depart in New York, and when they get engaged, he moves to West to work, to raise money, essentially, and they write these long love letters to each other. I always thought that was really romantic. I always enjoy watching them writing to each other. It happens in this adaptation and also in the 2017 series.
I was going to say there is not a lot of versions of Jo and Friedrich writing to each other. I think it is because stuff happens so quickly. When I think about the 33 and 49 versions, it feels like a month has passed or 2 months after Jo leaving New York before Friedrich comes to see her. Whereas in the book, it is few years.
You do get to know a person when you write letters to them. It is very personal, writing a letter. It is more personal than an Instagram message. I just love it.
I like that we actually really see and hear their voices, the voiceover of their letters. That is a really nice moment. I am glad you did remind me. That is a really good moment of them.
I always felt that if Beth would have lived, she would have loved Jo and Friedrich together, definitely.
Oh my God, yeah, I remember a long time ago, someone had asked me, how do you think Friedrich and Beth would have been with each other? I wrote, they would have connected to each other through music, because obviously we know Friedrich plays the piano and violin. Am I right?
Yes.
So I feel like he would have, with his gentle nature, approach her and be like, hello, Beth. I heard that you are a great lover of music. I brought this piece of music we can play together. She would play the piano and he would play the violin, and that would be their introduction. I think I have a story somewhere where Beth sits there and goes like, Jo, if he becomes my brother-in-law, I will be so happy. And Jo is like, what? That is her moment of being like, wait a minute, sort of realizing her own feelings. I should reblog that because I did write that a while ago.
Do it.
Yeah, I have to find it. But yeah, it was great. That was a pretty good moment.
I do think Jo did fell for Friedrich because there is that familiarity to Beth. There is some kind of similar essence with them. They both have this ability to calm her, and that is important in both of those relationships.
I have always felt that Friedrich and Beth were really similar. I think they have the same zodiac. I think they are both Cancers.
Do you want to know a fun fact?
Of course.
Henry David Thoreau was a Cancer.
Yes. I was trying to figure out everybody's birthdays from the story, and I remember thinking I am just going to look at the people they are based off to help me. I think with Amy and Beth, when I tried to look it up, all I got, oh, this is the year they were born. I didn't get the month. Jo, she was born in November. She is Sagittarius, but I had hard time finding what the certain characters are, so I had to check out their birthdays.
Cancer is a water sign, a new headcanon.
My mom is a Sagittarius. That is why I feel pretty certain that Jo is a Sagittarius. They have similar features.
Yes, I think Jo is a Sagittarius or a Scorpio.
I would have said that Jo was a Scorpio, but when I checked it, she was born in the end of November, making her Sagittarius.
Okay.
Louisa May Alcott was a Sagittarius. That is why people think that Jo is Sagittarius too.
Then it must be true. I'm a Virgo. I was just born in the moment when Leo turns into Virgo, and I always thought that I'm a little bit of a Leo because of that.
I am Pisces. Aries comes after that, but I don't feel like I am much of an Aries. When I went to look at Sagittarius, their fire signs are Aries, but also Leo, which is what I thought Amy is because May Alcott was Leo.
Oh, I love that.
So it sort of makes sense to me why the two of them butt heads.
That makes a lot of sense.
Also why both Jo and Amy get along with Meg and Beth, because Meg is a Pisces. She was born in February, if I remember correctly. Meg and Beth are water signs, and then Jo and Amy are fire signs.
This explains everything in Little Woman.
One of the things you never expected, obviously, is from this ranking, is the position of the zodiac.
I don't know if this is true. I have had quite a few people in the comments writing me that they think that Laurie is a Gemini. Maybe. Gemini is an air sign and their moods can switch pretty fast.
I remember reading one study on that, and they had put him as an Aquarius, and that is another air sign. It is funny that you say Gemini because when I looked up his birthday, it was around Aquarius between January and February. It makes sense in the terms of the relationships between the characters.
He's definitely an air sign, then.
One of the reasons I think he is Aquarius is when I read the personality for a man, it said rebellious, charismatic, and spontaneous.
That sounds a lot like Laurie.
So I was like, okay. They also put on their good sites too. They are honest, loyal, and devoted. I think when you get past the more negative sides, he is extremely loyal. He stays loyal to Jo throughout the years, even if it does not become romantic. He is still friends with her. And there are times when I feel like he is pretty honest too with Amy.
I think we need to make another episode about zodiac signs in Little Woman.
Yeah, some people are going to be like, zodiac signs are nonsense, but there are people who believe or are interested, even if it is just for fun, who likes this kind of stuff.
Yes, even if you don't believe in zodiac signs, they can be a lot of fun.
It is one of those symbolism type of things. When you are writing a character, it can make a character to make more sense